2 points that I would like to rebuttal from the previous speaker from the opening opposition is that they stated that the human errors systems in our models are worse in the situation. Compared to them, in their world, the perpetrators still have the power because their assets are not being secured by the government and they have no obligation to return the money that they have taken from the poor people. Therefore, the likelihood of bribery is far more probable than in their side, which will be later elaborated on my first point of argument. Second, even if human errors were bound to happen at our sides, at the very least, we create a world where the corruptors, especially a big time to think twice, because given impact to them are far more damaging and the probability of them going to uprise again from the state that they are living after jail right now is far more less for them to do the same thing. It creates deterrence. And second of all, we also would like to counter how the worry of the opening opposition of how the small corruptors actually are not being given enough punishment. Therefore, it creates a sense of imbalance when it comes to injustice. And we would like to clarify clearly that the small corruptors are still punished by the jail time because the magnitude of damage that they cause doesn't get to the point where it causes the massive effect. Therefore, we only would like to create the big timer, and we also don't. The second of all, we also don't want to impoverish this small timer. The sentence of jail time is actually enough for them because these small timers are most likely to come from the middle to low class. Why is that so? They don't have enough power to massively impact to do a big scale corruption because they have no power to begin with to do corruption. So therefore, it is far more optimal for the small corruptors to be just sentenced by jail time rather than impoverishing them, because that's actually the condition that they live in right now. We can see that the opening government doesn't picturize the successibility of the models and how can it be justified. They only tip the scale of or touch the surface of how it will just, but without any elaboration of why does it actually justifiable. They only bring the technical, but we do acknowledge the contribution towards this motion. Now, we would like to deep dive into my first argument, which will elaborating about how does it justify when it comes to impoverishing these people. We can see from the three factors. First of all, how this individual who committed corruption actually do these crimes in their intention, willingly. It doesn't. By the time they try to they do the corruption, it is justifiable to debuff and impoverish the people because the individual are willingly and intentionally do the corruption based on the greedy, because they don't have quite the factors that push them to do so, because we can see that these big timers corruptors already live in the environment where it's safe enough for them to grow economically. Therefore, it is actually, we can assume that it is actually based on how greedy they are. But even if somehow they're forced to do so, the impact can dominate to nationwide scale. It still brings more harm to the people. For example, we already do the same for the eye for an eye type of punishment. For example, we are applying the death penalty to drug dealers because they actually affecting the many lives of people who are producing drugs that for these people to be consumed. Using the same logic and flow, we can also apply the same characteristic of corruption where they willingly take in the money from the poor, but instead the government should take it from the perpetrator, which will also create more benefit, which will later be elaborated on my point of argument. Which is why it is justifiable for these individual corruptors to be punished with impoverishment. Second of all, the punishment in current status quo is actually doesn't enough to cover the sense of regret and guilt. The current punishment doesn't reach to the point of that where it gives the sense of guilt and regret. Why is that so? First, it still has the tendency of doing the same crime based on the remaining assets and power. The corruptors have the power when it comes in jail time to not as suffered as other inmates. We can see this by how actually the corruptors' jail is far more fancy than those who are committed the petty crime or those who are committed crime from the middle or low class. They are far more fancy because they have power to do so. And second of all, in current status quo, we do acknowledge how enough and progressing the awareness of what can be caused from corruption. Despite the state of a country they live in, money still has the power to control the society. And therefore, it is fragile enough for people to be broke despite the state of the nation. For example, either it's developing or developed country, both of these countries have the tendency of where the money is far more powerful than others, than the the corruption is one of the crime that fully correlates with the economical status and how superior our people with money are, which justifies that how this impoverishment is far more suitable rather than using the same punishment that already been applied in status quo right now. The third of all is how it creates the sense of injustice when it comes to the family. Because picture this, when the poor people has been affected by how these corruptors are going, they are far become more struggle. Even before and after the jail time of the perpetrators, it is far more damaging for them because they see the family of the perpetrator are living life, living hedonistic and living lavish, happy from the money or assets, because there's nothing that binds, that sees the treasure and the obligation that ties them to replace or return the money that they already stolen, which will, and by applying our models, we will create the sense of retribution, which correlates and in line with the criminal justice system. This will create the sense of justice for these people who already been affected by the crime. And moving on to my second argument, the opening opposition glorify the act of rehabilitation, but they doesn't explain the mechanization of the rehab itself. To what point does it work? To what point it will succeed? Well, it does. First of all, we clearly stated that it doesn't create deterrence when it comes to rehabilitation. Why? We should see the characteristic of these corruptors. Even if they are going to be told that the corruption is bad, the power that they have from the money, it's not being controlled or not have the obligation to replace the money. Therefore, this will open the tendency of people doing the corruption again because they still already have the power. The second, it is the element of the money or source itself. It will not create deterrence if we don't take the source of the power itself, which is money, which our model are more applied to. Let's say, even if rehab works, it doesn't create retribution towards the affected society as well. Therefore, it will ignite the sense of injustice because government only fixated on repairing criminals rather than the collateral victims. The second of all, we should perceive this how our models will benefit others. Our models can benefit with the infrastructure. This is a far more feasible impact rather than the rehab on a single individual that the opening opposition try to glorify. And the second of all, it is the sense of money retrieval, which will also contribute towards the society rather than in them. The treasure is still in possession of the perpetrator, and it gives zero contribution towards the society at the very least. Therefore, we would like to propose. Thank you.